Thank you for joining Leadership Rediscovered, a podcast devoted to all things leadership. I'm Laura Siebold, president and founder of Shine Consulting, and each week I interview different leaders from different industries and different walks of life to learn their unique definition of leadership. And today I'm really excited and pleased to introduce Wade Linger, who is the president and CEO of TMC Technologies. Wade, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation. I've heard a lot of good things about you. I know you've done a lot of good things for the economy in West Virginia and North Central West Virginia. So I think this will be a good conversation.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So I just like to start. I've read your bio. You have a really impressive background. Some very interesting things that you've done in your career. But I always like to give guests a chance just to introduce themselves in their own terms and their own words. So I would love to just start by hearing, what is your leadership journey or your story, however you want to share with us. I'd just like to get to know you a little bit more.
Okay, well, I'm a native of West Virginian, born in Charleston.
Okay.
I'm the son of a public school teacher and coach. And so I grew up in the Putnam County, Kanawha County area until high school. And then my dad got a job in Front Royal, Virginia. So I went to high school in Northern Virginia.
Okay.
So after that, I joined the Air Force, and ultimately they trained me to be a computer programmer. And so that's where I got my main job skills that I've used throughout the rest of my life was in the Air Force. And so as far as leadership goes, I was eventually promoted to staff sergeant. I was a non-commissioned officer, and that caused me to have to lead.
Yeah.
And so I had some training, and I did that. So after my time in the Air Force, I was at the end of the Air Force career. I was in Tidewater, Virginia area, Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay.
And I went to work for a defense contractor. But by then, I was senior enough that I immediately was put in charge of a group that wrote some software and maintained software for the Navy. So I was kind of thrust into a leadership position. I wasn't looking for it, but I was, and so from there, worked there, and then eventually in the early '90s, my company decided to open an office in Fairmont.
Okay.
The purpose of it was to bring the high-tech industry, the government contracting stuff that we did there, into North Central West Virginia, try to diversify the economy and build some capability in that arena. So that's what they did. They sent me there, and I did. After a couple of years, I was very impressed with the kind of support that small West Virginia businesses had from people like Congressman Mollahan and Senator Byrd, and the way that they were using their positions in Congress. So as part of my role working for Mantech, I was supposed to be teaching small West Virginia companies the ropes, how to work in this arena. And I saw there was a lot of other people doing the same thing, from some other large companies, and in the creation of the High Tech Consortium Foundation.
Yeah.
So eventually I left and went to work for the High Tech Foundation. And when it first started, as first vice president of research, and operated from that perspective. Again, as a vice president, that was a leadership position.
Yeah.
But after a year or so, I decided to stop talking the talk and walk the walk. So, together with the support of some local entrepreneurs in the Fairmont area that had been successful in some other businesses, we started the first TMC Technologies. So that's kind of the evolution of the way that it's evolved for me to seemingly I always keep stepping into another leadership position, whether I mean to or not. And so that's kind of what I've done since then. Along the way, then Governor Manchin appointed me to the State Board of Education. And so that was several years in that role. That was interesting.
Wow.
And I have my own hot rod shop, so I have to lead that.
That is so cool.
So I haven't ever felt that I was seeking leadership positions. It just seems to follow me.
Yeah.
And So I do.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me just because I think you've had a lot of leadership growth along your journey and within your story. And so one of the questions that I'm curious about just to hear from your perspective is maybe some of the differences around being a leader within an organization versus being at the top of the organization, and just maybe what that experience has been like for you. And maybe you operated exactly the same way and had the same mindset, or
No,
maybe different, but I'd love to hear your
no,
perspective.
I found it to be situational. The type of leadership
Mm,
depends on the situation you're in.
yeah.
When you're in the military and they put you into a leadership role, it's your job to lead whatever group that you're
Yeah.
put in charge of, but they have to follow.
Yeah. Yes.
They have to follow. So
You give an order and
they have to follow. It's different.
yeah.
And I found that when working as an entrepreneur, when you're first starting a
Mm-hmm.
business and all you really have to sell is your story and the vision,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's a whole different thing. I can't imagine some of the people that over the years have come to work for me in the first phases of these businesses, looking back and they're putting their trust in my vision
Yeah.
and their trust in and my ability to pull it off, and they have families and house
Mm-hmm.
payments and so forth. So that kind of leadership is, you have to have the vision, but you also have to have some charisma
Yeah.
and be able to convince others
Yeah.
that you're going to be successful.
Yes.
And so that's a different kind of thing.
It is. It's a lot more responsibility too.
Well, it
When you
is.
talk about families that
That's right, and I think of it that way. I mean, yeah,
yeah.
all these people, and when they come to work for a company that I have,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm responsible for that. I can't let them
Yeah.
down. And but then when you move forward and the company becomes more mature, um, like the company is now, like TMC is now, we have
Yeah.
135 employees all
Wow.
across the country. Um, well, now it's different. It's easier for me to imagine somebody coming to work for a company that's been around for 15 years and has successfully made
Mm-hmm.
payroll every time for 15 years.
Good job, because that's not an easy thing to do
and
either.
and that, but now I don't know each one of them individually and all that. So the
Yeah.
leadership style then has to be more of having a vision that I can convey, that they can want to support
Yeah.
and get on board without any kind of personal feelings or anything. It's just they have to believe it and believe
Yes.
that they can contribute and that it's going to work out. It's a
Mm-hmm.
whole different level of confidence that they have to have. So it's a different kind of leadership. Now
Yeah.
the the tough part, and over the last few years since COVID,
Mm-hmm.
in my view, leadership and what it takes to be a leader has changed completely.
Ooh, say more about that.
Uh, uh, I was I grew up in a lead by example,
Mm-hmm.
um, and people could tell just by the way you operate and the way that you work, they can tell what's expected of them.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of implies that they see you.
Physically.
So now it's different because
It
they don't.
is.
Most of them
Yeah.
don't, and it's really harder.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny that you bring that up, because as I was listening to you say 130 employees across the country, I was thinking these are probably remote employees, or maybe
Mhm.
you have some offices, but what is your arrangement?
Well, the vast majority of TMC's employees are either working in a cubicle in a government building somewhere,
Oh,
or
okay.
they're working from home, or a hybrid where they go back and forth.
Yeah.
In our office in Fairmont, there's probably 20, maybe 20
Yeah.
of so more than 100 don't do that,
Yeah.
and so it's different.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I first went to work for Mantech,
Mm-hmm.
and I first met my boss. when I was interviewing, he had a company car, and I was marveling about that. And he said, "Well, don't worry, Wade. It'll be a long time before you have one of these." And then, but then the day that the first couple of days I was at work there at the office, ran into him in the hallway, and I said, "I like your parking space. I see you have a reserved parking space." And he said, "No." He said, "If you're a real leader, you don't need a reserved parking space because you're here first."
Oh, there's a lead by example,
and
right?
So, and I've always felt that way. It's like, well, if you don't have to tell anybody that you expect people to come in early and work hard and stay late if need be, if you're doing it.
If you're doing it.
Well, now they can't see that.
They can't see that. So I would love to hear if you've found some success in making a transition or a change in how you approach leadership, because you're right. I think, and there's a lot of companies that are struggling, because I do think typically the tech industry was a little bit ahead of the curve, like in most things, but ahead of the curve on work from home. So you did have some organizations that were doing that prior to the pandemic, but regardless, now we're in this interesting situation where companies are still trying to figure out, should we mandate people come back into the office that used to be in an office? How do we feel about a hybrid and all of that? So, I mean, I would love to hear your take on just how you've maybe approached or changed your leadership style, or maybe encouraged other leaders within your organization to think a little bit differently, because you're right, it is different.
Well, at my age, they had to convince me. I'm still, I'm difficult to convince on those kinds of things. But I will say that I'm fortunate to be in a field where it is much easier to deal with. I recognize that it's easier for the computer services industry to work this way than it is many other industries. I can't imagine some industries doing it, but it just puts extra work on the managers, because you can't just walk around. They used to call it management by walking around.
Yeah.
You can't just walk around and get a feel for who's hustling and who isn't. You have to do a lot better job of stating what your expectations are and making sure that the subordinates know what they're expected to do, and that you judge them and you assess whether they need help or not based on what they produce, not how they look like they're producing. So it's different. It's different, and frankly, again, especially in our field, and it's no secret that a lot of people in our industry are sort of introverts, and that a lot of them are actually more productive.
Yes.
They're not distracted. They're not distracted. And
yes, I think the extroverts were more negatively impacted by work from home.
Some people just can't do it. But most people in my field are fine with it and do a fine job of it.
Yeah.
And so it's I'm still learning. And it definitely blurs the line a little bit more between leadership and management.
Yes.
Because you have to have management skills to be a good leader. And you have to have a little bit of leadership skills to be a manager. But when people are working remotely, it necessitates a lot more just plain management that says, here are the tasks that have to be done, here's your deadline. And if you're at home and you have to do some kind of task at home, I don't care, because we're going to, as long as you make your deadline and it's good work, it doesn't matter. It's different.
It is. It's almost like project management versus, like you said, true leadership, and I think that is hard, because it's a lot easier for people to feel really disconnected and not part of. Most people want to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves, and I think it's a little bit harder to feel that when we're all not co-located together.
Well, leadership is setting a vision and setting a direction and doing it in a way that you get the most out of the people that you can, that they can do. You get their best because they believe it and they want to be a part of it. So it's a little tougher, but as far as things like the corporate culture and that kind of thing that you want to have, in the case of TMC, we like the family, almost family business atmosphere, and we care about you and all that.
Yeah.
Well, when you have people, in 15 different states and different time zones and
Yeah.
all this kind of thing, that gets a little harder to have that culture.
Yeah.
Now, the way that we do it is that we actually do corporate videos and things,
Okay.
not terribly unlike this, and to try to send them out and keep everybody in the loop.
Yeah.
And we have March Madness contests and involve our employees in those kinds of things. And we do tailgating at WVU football, and we do different things to try to draw people in and make them feel like they're a part of it. But you really have to put forth an effort. You can't just rely on people just getting together by the water cooler, And it's just
those natural conversations that used to happen. To your point, you have to actually schedule those conversations and make a real intentional effort to connect with people, and probably, I would assume, check in on them a little bit more. Hey, how's it going? Not even so much from a just pure, are you getting your tasks done, but just how are you? Because those were the other types of conversations that would just naturally come up. You would know somewhat what was going on in someone's personal life just by bumping into them at the kitchen or wherever you were at the copier. And now it's just kind of like, I have to ask that question. How are things going in your family? How are you doing? Just because it's not as natural anymore.
Well, it's actually a part of we actually have a system. And of course, with this many employees, we have several different contracts in several different areas. So we have managers at the geographic locations, and we actually have a meeting every month with each manager, program management review. And one of the things that our mid-level managers have to say is, yes, I spoke with every single one of them, and we talked about this and that. So we quiz our mid-level managers every month to certify that they have made a contact with every employee, so they care. And it does matter. It does matter.
Love that.
You can't have employees that feel like they're just a number and that they don't matter.
Yes, yeah.
Especially in our field, because they could go to work for anybody.
Oh yeah.
And now that it's, as anybody can work remote, they can work for anybody anywhere.
Yeah, it made your talent pool a lot more competitive, for sure.
Well,
everybody's, but especially yours.
So when I first started operating in West Virginia, the challenge was getting people in our field to understand and believe there were really jobs like this in West Virginia, to get them to stay after they graduated and not leave the state, or to come back.
Yep.
But one good thing was that while in this field there's a lot of turnover and people have lots of opportunities to get better paying jobs and move along, we had a pretty good situation here, because if you get a West Virginian to move back, they really wanted to stay here, and they weren't that vulnerable to being picked off by some big company somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, that's all changed.
Yeah.
Now, they can still live in West Virginia and work for a company in Las Vegas. I mean, it's no problem.
I know.
So,
how are you willing to share maybe any strategies or things that you try to do to retain your talent? Because I know a lot of businesses in that position, maybe even physical brick and mortar businesses that just have a lot of competition, and maybe they are smaller than some other competitors, and maybe they can't compete on salary, and so they're trying to figure out, how do we hold, because it's one of those situations where it's like, we raise our salaries and then our competitor raises their salaries and then we raise our salary. It just keeps going up and up and up and up, and they're not able to compete. And so I know companies that are going through this. I know departments that lose talent to other departments within the company. That happens too. So if you have any strategies or things that have been successful for you all in terms of retaining talent, it would be great to hear that.
Well, I don't know I don't know that we're the best at it.
Yeah.
We try to be,
Yeah.
but we try to make sure all of our employees know we really care about them personally.
Yeah.
We absolutely make sure that we have the best benefits package available. We compete. We know what the big guys have, so
Yeah.
our health insurance and dental and all those kinds of things. We keep those right as good as anywhere, so they don't compete with
That's
that.
expensive too. That's really,
And
I don't think
that's a
people
constant.
realize that's really
Well,
expensive.
and that's a yearly constant thing to
Yeah.
be shopping that and making sure that we're doing the best we can with it.
Yeah.
But we do little quirky things like everybody in this field has some kind of plan for paying for training and college, reimbursement, that kind of thing for their employees. Well, nobody comes to work for a company like TMC that doesn't have at least a bachelor's degree, and usually they have a master's, and sometimes they have a PhD.
Yeah.
So offering them tuition assistance, I mean, what's that going to do?
Yeah.
But we expanded that, and we offer that same level of tuition assistance to their families. So now maybe you already have your master's degree, but you got kids that are graduating from high school now and they're starting college. Well, we help with that tuition.
I've
instead.
Never heard of a company doing that. That's really cool.
And I can't tell you, how much college we've paid for the spouses and the children of TMC employees.
That is really neat.
That has an impact. That matters. They feel that and they appreciate it. I've even had thank you notes from the children of employees when they graduated send the thank you notes to me, to TMC, for helping with their college. So you have to be looking for things like that, and we do.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, because I think, and I like how you said we do quirky things, but that's actually those are the things that make you different and that do allow you to separate yourself from other options that people do have. And if you find someone that cares about the same things you care about, that prioritizes the same things, then that's very appealing to them. There's some people that don't care about benefits, and there's a lot of people that truly, that is the differentiating factor for them of who they decide to work for, because it's that important to them. And then the tuition thing is really cool. I also love that you are holding your managers accountable for being managers. And this is something that I feel pretty strongly about, because I do think a lot of times companies will invest a lot in leadership training or leadership coaching, which I do these things. So I'm not, I certainly value it and recognize the importance in it. But the challenge sometimes is that it can be approached in a very check the box manner, where it's like, well, we offered leadership training, or, we got this person a coach, so like, check, that should be done. And from my perspective, I mean, how performance gets measured in other aspects. You get assessed on, did you get certain results or did you meet certain goals from a business perspective, from a technical perspective. But a lot of times I think companies struggle to actually hold leaders accountable for being leaders. And did you do the things that you're responsible for as a leader, as a manager, not just did this I get dotted and this T get crossed by you and all of your employees. So I think that's really significant that you're doing that, because as you know, I mean, if it's something that nobody's really going to measure you on, and definitely if you're not going to get rewarded on it, or there won't be consequences, how likely are we to do it?
Yeah. Well, again, we could spend a long time talking about those kinds of details, but these program management reviews, one of the things that go on in those reviews every month is at the beginning of the year, each of those managers signs up to a budget for the year, and what they're going to produce in terms of revenue and all that, and profits for their division. And every month, they're part of that meeting is, where are you? And are you above the line or below the line? If you're above the line, great. If you're below the line, what are you going to do to fix it? And how can we help? Yeah. Because the recruiting group works for headquarters.
Oh, okay.
So the recruiters work for headquarters.
Okay.
but they're recruiting for these managers out in the field. So
Yeah.
if they have some open positions that they haven't been able to fill,
Mm-hmm.
then it's our job to step in and help them fill those positions, because that's how
Yeah.
you generate the revenue.
Absolutely. You need
And
all
so
of those
it's
chairs
it's
filled.
a but that manager is responsible for that part of it,
Mm-hmm.
and but he or she knows what they're responsible for, and there's no
Yeah.
surprises.
Yeah.
And so that meeting is really, how are you doing? And if you're in any area you're not doing so well, how can we help? Because we're the ones that have
Mm-hmm.
the resources to do that.
Absolutely.
And so what I'm hoping that that'll do is allow a small company from West Virginia to continue to grow,
Yeah.
um, and expand without just putting a strain on any particular group, because if your group goes to a certain size, then of course it'll be divided up and they'll have their PMRs. So
Yeah.
it's working.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it, but with a lot of intention on your part, and I'm sure your leadership team's part, in terms of how do we actively manage this. You're not just kind of like, oh, let's see what happens. I mean, I
Well,
could tell that you're very intentional about how you approach it.
no, and I've learned a lot too. I mean, I didn't make all this up. You know,
Yeah.
I've been able to put together a team. I'll call out Jeff Edgel, works.
Yeah.
He's our chief operating officer now.
Okay, great.
And I mean, when I go back to the 90s when I opened the Mantech office here, Jeff was a young guy, not too long out of college, that came to work for me then.
Uh-huh.
And now we're back together again, and he comes forth with all this experience that he's gained over the years, and I've come from this angle, and we've put that together, and a lot of these processes, have been brought forth by his experience coming up through. In fact, you should have him on this program sometime.
Well, maybe we will. He sounds great too. And it sounds like you two have a good partnership. Would you say that I know, so I don't know if you've ever read the book Traction, but they talk a lot about the visionary and the integrator. And a lot of times you'll see someone serves the role of more the visionary, and then someone serves more in the role of an integrator. I don't know if you have that type of arrangement with him, or how you would describe maybe your strengths versus his strengths.
Well, I would say that's kind of true, except I would call him visionary too.
Okay.
So we have it's a good team.
Good balance, yeah.
And I spend a lot more time now doing things like dealing with the banks and insurances and that kind of thing.
Sounds fun.
And and to try to make sure that Jeff and everybody on down the chain, that you clear the way so that they can do what they need to do without feeling like that there's some impediment that they don't have the power to push it to the side.
I feel like I'm getting a really good sense of your leadership style, but I would love to hear in your words how you define leadership, and how you would describe your leadership style.
Well, knowing I was coming here today, I started trying to look at things up and all that. And I guess laissez-faire is one of the. I try to set the goal out there. I try to surround myself with people who feel the same way I do about the way you treat people, and fairness and ethics and honesty and that kind of thing. And we have once a year we have a strategic retreat, and we talk about the big picture and where we're trying to get. And then I let people do what they do. I don't hire people that I think are smarter than I am and then try to micromanage them. I just don't do that.
Yes.
I want every one of them to be smarter than me, and it's working out pretty well.
I mean, I don't know why more people haven't picked up on this, because that's the strategy I've always tried to use. Like, hey, why don't I just, there's a lot that I don't know how to do, and there's a lot that I'm not good at, but I know there's people out there that are.
But if you can find them, then let them do what they do. Don't
try to control it.
No. So I really don't do. I know we're conflating management with leadership, but I really don't micromanage anybody. It's almost like management by exception. I mean, as long as everything's going fine and we're all going in the direction we agreed we were going on, I'm not going to question whether it's thee or thou.
Exactly.
Just do it.
That's another way you can differentiate yourself from others and have people want to work for you, because there's a lot of people that don't like to be micromanaged.
Well, not in my field. They don't.
No.
In fact, you want them to be innovators and you want them to be risk takers. You have to respect risk takers, and you have to understand that sometimes things don't work out.
Yeah.
And you don't, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that, but you're right. That's another element that you have to take into consideration of, if you're asking people to behave in a certain way, then by your leadership practices, are you almost making them feel differently about what you really expect? So, are you practicing what you preach? If you're saying we want people to be risk takers and innovative, and then we try to control every decision and every detail of what they're looking at, then does that really feel like we're okay with risk taking?
Yeah.
Or, because there's a lot of vulnerability that comes with innovation and being a risk taker. And a lot of times you are having to do things that are out of your comfort zone, or you're not 100% sure how it's going to turn out. And, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
Well, right. I didn't hear it that way, but yeah. Of course, that's one good thing about the larger the company gets.
Yes.
The more, it sounds funny, but the more capacity you have to absorb things going wrong.
Yeah.
So in some ways, when you have some of the kinds of employees that I have that are really out there, some of this AI and some of this stuff.
Oh, it's wild.
You can let them go. I mean, and it's exciting. I love being around those kinds of people. It's one of the best things about my career is that the kinds of people you get to work with.
Yeah. And a lot of cool. I am so fascinated by your industry, because I don't know how you all keep up, or not even keep up, but you're the ones that are really supposed to be on the cutting edge, right? Or telling the rest of us what is the new and the greatest and the best. And I have a hard enough time just keeping up, with basic day-to-day technologies. And so I'm so curious, how do you all really help set the trends for the future, or help identify where things are going in technology?
Well, I hire people who are like that. I'm the old guy. I mean, they're dragging me along. So, I just love it, because all this stuff's new to me. And so I'm one of these guys that's like, just leave my email alone. I'll be fine, and but it's always something new, and the kinds of people that work in TMC live for that. They would get bored so quick if there wasn't some possibility of a new way of doing the same thing, but a new way. It's better, faster, cooler, way of doing it. And so I try to surround myself by those kinds of people, and then let them do it.
Let them fly, right? Not try to micromanage it.
No, never.
That's amazing. What would you say, has there been, because I'm always fascinated by people with a military career, and thank you for your service. I think it's, there's a lot of great leadership training that happens, both formal training and just more of the learning by example. So you've had amazing experiences, I'm sure, within the military, but then within your career. So I'd love to hear, as you think about who you are as a leader today, maybe what has most shaped or impacted or influenced that, if it's a particular person or just some learnings that you've had along the way throughout your career.
Well, it's a series of things. I go back to, when I was in the Air Force. They had the little trainings that we went to and all that. And again, it was nice because your subordinates had to follow, as long as they had to follow. So you got to practice, on easy. And then, my first boss at Mantech, I learned an awful lot from him about letting people. He let me go. I made mistakes, and I learned from him the way he dealt with my mistakes, and I, it must have been okay because I continued to advance within that company. So I credit him a lot. Barry Munson's his name.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for saying his
Barry
name. Yeah,
Munson.
we give shout outs.
And, but, you know, when you've been doing it so long, every day is another little learning experience. And I've really tried to learn from my mistakes and really watch and learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
But I think we are who we are.
Yeah.
And so you can tweak things a little this and a little like that. But I think that if I ever gotten to the point where it was a situation where I just felt like I had to micromanage people and I had to boss them around, that kind of thing, I think I'd just retire.
Yeah.
I know it's not me. You know, and
that takes all the fun out of it.
Well, and you know, I'm sure there's a lot of fields where it has to be done that way. But I'm just fortunate that I'm in one where you don't.
Yeah.
You're dealing with smart people that are motivated, self-motivated, and I don't have to do it, and I like it that way.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, because I think there are a lot of fields where leaders would say they have to do it because they're very regulated and compliance driven fields. But at the same time, I would argue, no, if you're clear about what those expectations are, what the regulations are, you know, we have to do it this way because the FAA says it, or the FDA, or, you know, pick your government agency. They claim we have to do it this way. That's fine. But I think sometimes it's almost used it's overused, I would say, in some of those industries where there's such a reliance on, well, the regulations say we can't do that, or this agency says we can't do that, that it becomes really restrictive on people, and it causes them to feel that they have to control and micromanage because, oh, you know, we might get in trouble with the regulators and all of that, which I totally understand. But I still go back to, if you're clear about the expectations and you're clear about the regulations, you can still let people do what they're hired to do and trained to do. And, you know, and I think sometimes it almost is more of a hindrance than it should be in those industries because they kind of might over rely on it a little bit. Well,
I've always admired the leaders at the top levels, you know, people that will spend 10 years as CEO of Hewlett Packard, and then they get hired to go run GM for a while, or General Electric, and it's like they're completely different products, completely different industries, but they're still good leaders, and they know how to hit a goal, and so that kind of makes your point is that you know, good leadership is good leadership.
Absolutely,
so,
I agree with you.
I just don't want to try it in any other field.
You're good. You're good where you are. You like what you're doing.
I like it. I like the kind of people I work with. And
nobody come try to poach Wade. He doesn't want to run your business.
No, even on the Wade's Garage, the hot rod shop, that's a whole different.
How did that get started? I'm so fascinated. Were you just like, hey, I like...
Well, I've always loved cars.
Yeah.
And I sold the first TMC in 2005.
Okay.
And I had some money, and I had a 5-year non-compete agreement.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you had to sit out a little bit.
I really didn't want. I was kind of tired. And I really didn't want to work in the same exact field, and I certainly couldn't go competing against the company that bought my company.
Yeah.
With the same customers and all that.
Right.
So I said I wouldn't, and I didn't want to.
Yeah.
And I love cars, so I built a garage and started building hot rods. And so, but it was kind of strange, you know, even though it's a whole different kind of workforce. And you still came down to, you have a project, you put you know, estimate the cost, and you work hours against the project, and you complete the project, and it's like a contract, the same thing.
Not as different as it might seem, huh?
It's not as different as you might think.
Did you feel the same amount of pressure or responsibility, or did it feel different to you because it almost feels like it started as a hobby that became a business? But did that make it feel different to you, or did you kind of approach it with the same level of seriousness, I guess, that you did with TMC and your other positions?
No, unfortunately, took it as serious, and I still do. It's you still have a customer you've promised to deliver a certain product to, and you have employees that have the skills to do it, and you have to motivate them to do it, and make it all work out. And if anything goes wrong, it's just as much of a gut punch as it is, in the technology services stuff. So the only other kind of different branch of this whole leadership thing was my stint on the West Virginia State Board of
I'm
Education.
glad you brought that up, because I want to hear about that, and just what that experience was like for you. That's a very important role in the state. And how long did you serve?
I was there for 7 years.
Oh, wow. Any details you'd be willing to share of just what that experience was like, the types of decisions? Because I think for most of us, if we've not been on one of those boards or committees or agencies, everyone's just kind of like, what do they actually do? Like, what are they responsible for?
Yeah, well, that's what I asked.
Yeah.
But well, that was an interesting stint because it's a leadership type of role. But the entire board is made up of leaders.
Yeah.
So you're a leader among a bunch of leaders.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot there. One of the problems was that if you think of the State Board of Education being the leaders of education in the state, well, professional educators don't think of it that way, because they've been, I wasn't trained as an educator. They've spent their whole life in training. So how could I possibly lead? So we had to deal with that. But we had on that board when I was there, we had Lloyd Jackson, Mike Green, Gail Manchin, for example, and they're all leaders. And one thing I learned there is that good leaders are normally good followers too. And so if you're a good leader and you appreciate when somebody else is in the lead, you appreciate what it means to be a good follower and to support people. We all kind of had our thing that we were particularly interested in, and we tried to support the others. Mike Green's big thing was getting technology infrastructure, broadband to every school in the state.
Which is huge.
And we did it. I mean, Mike pushed, and we before we left, there was fiber to every school in the state of West Virginia. I mean, when they hooked up the fiber in Pickens, we were ecstatic.
Oh my gosh. Well, and think about how much that came into play. I'm not sure what year that was, but I would assume it was before the pandemic.
Oh yeah.
So you think about, I remember, because I live in a more rural area, there were many schools where they were saying, if you don't have internet access at your home, you can come and pick up off of the school's Wi-Fi.
Right.
If you come to the school parking lot.
That was a really big deal.
Wow.
And so that was something that was difficult for what reasons I won't go into, but it was a difficult thing to pull it off.
Yeah.
And Mike was relentless, and the board backed him, and it got done. My thing was hiring practices, that was, and I was, backed by the board, and getting that kind of thing done. Each one of us kind of had a thing that was the main thing, and we supported each other and got some big things done during that
Now,
time.
were those assigned to you, or did you come into the committee with, hey, this is something that I feel strongly about and I'm passionate about? Or was it kind of like, hey,
well,
we selected you because we want you to focus on this?
No, the broadband stuff was sort of already underway.
Okay.
But it was faltering, and Mike especially picked it up and made sure it didn't get dropped. Gail Manchin's her big thing was making sure that the rural schools like in McDowell County, Welch, and down in that area it was so difficult to get teachers down there and all the things. She worked tirelessly to try to improve the situation of having enough teachers and appropriate school for the kids in those kinds of really difficult places. So, and we got my stuff, I got the hiring practices done. Lloyd Jackson's big thing was accountability.
Ah.
The making sure that that we really knew whether our schools, how well they were doing, and whether students in one school were getting as good an education as another.
Mm-hmm.
And he pushed hard for that, and we all backed him on that kind of stuff. So we learned that you can be a leader and a follower at the same time.
That's such a good point. And I also like that you reference the respect that you have of other people in leadership roles. I have this theory that it would be so helpful in a business context if employees within the business really knew what it was like to be a business owner, to feel the responsibility and the weight of, and also just from a more technical perspective, just the drivers of a business too. I think about, for people who do own their own business, a lot of times you'll say nobody's going to care about your business as much as you do, right?
Yeah, well.
and it's also, nobody probably understands the weight of the responsibility or the challenges that come with owning a business. So a lot of times, for example, if I'm in a business group with other business owners, there's a level of respect for, this isn't the easiest thing to do in the world. And if someone says, I've been in business for 15 years, we understand how hard it is to get to that point and how many businesses fail. Whereas if you've never done that before, you might not really appreciate it or respect it. And so I think that's a really interesting point about just, hey, there is that level of respect of, we may not have walked down the same path, but we probably have some war stories we could swap with each other.
Well, I guess one thing that I learned along the way that surprised me as I began to realize it is that there really aren't that many people who want to be the leader, to be the guy at the top, or the gal. That a lot of people are fine. It's like it's not like they want your job.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you can feel confident walking down a flight of stairs in front.
Yeah, that's right. There are just not that many people that want that on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And so I guess I got a lot more comfortable when I realized that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it seemed like in the military and even in the large corporate environment, you kind of felt like that there might be some people around you that are waiting for you to stumble so that they could take your place.
Yep.
But once you become the entrepreneur and the worrying about the line of credit and the insurance
payroll,
and
making payroll, and
most people they don't want your job. They don't want your job.
That's a very good point. I never thought about that, but yeah, you're right. That's so true. Well, I would like to hear, as you just look around you and you think about, where you've been on your career, are there opportunities for leadership that you see around you that maybe just, you could inspire other people to look for ways to step up if they want to step up as a leader, but maybe what opportunities you see now or even just coming down the pike that might be places where people could step up a little bit more and take more of an active role. And it could be in their jobs, it could be in their community, in their families, anything that you see.
Well, again, as somebody who's been an entrepreneur for quite a few years now, I still think there are innumerable opportunities out there in that way.
Yeah.
That anybody who actually wants to step up.
Yeah.
I've been involved in three different funds where we put together funding almost like a Shark Tank kind of a thing. And it's amazing how few people step up and want to come forward and say, I have this idea. Could you put in some money and help fund it? Everybody has an idea.
Yes.
And so I wish there were more people who would take that idea and actually strike out and run with it, especially in West Virginia.
Yeah.
I as I said, I was born in West Virginia, and I went up through middle school in West Virginia and high
Mm-hmm.
school in Northern Virginia. But, living in Northern Virginia and in my years in the Air Force and all that, just the way people generally think of West Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
it was disturbing to me. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to come back and try to fix
Yeah.
it. And so there's West Virginia being such a small state, and really there isn't anybody in West Virginia that if you really wanted to go talk to them, you couldn't do it.
Right.
There isn't anybody.
You're right.
And so there's being in West Virginia, the opportunities to stand out and go do something are much more easily attained than if you're a little fish in a big pond somewhere.
That's so true.
And so I encourage my fellow West Virginians to take advantage of the fact that you're somebody here, and you can, and nobody's inaccessible to you in West Virginia. Anybody is accessible.
You're like blowing my mind right now because I never really thought about it in that way, but you're right. If you're someone who really wants to make an impact and make a difference and you want to strike out on your end, there's no better place to do it than here, because not only can you make a big splash, but also you're in a state and you're in communities that are full of people that really want to see you succeed.
That's right. They're rooting for you, not against you.
Yeah. And there's it's a very supportive business community, but just beyond even business, it's truly still a help your neighbor kind of state, which really you don't see that as much anymore. But you're absolutely right. I went out west. I won't name the state, but it was out west, and I was over over the Christmas holiday, and I walked into different shops in their downtown area, and I just was like, "Hi, hello," walking into the shop, talking to the people there, and I felt like I was an inconvenience.
Yeah.
Every shop I went into, it was just and I thought, well, I mean, don't you want me to buy something from you? But I mean, just the way they acted, and I thought, oh, I'm not in West Virginia. I need to remember that maybe they're not as friendly here, or it's just they're not interested in really getting to know me or helping me that much. The way you could walk across the street and see a total stranger, and they're typically will talk to you and really genuinely want you to have a great day and do well.
Well, the ordinary person or the most powerful people in West Virginia are accessible.
Yeah.
And would like to see West Virginia succeed. And if you can help that happen, if you have an idea, they're on your side.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big fan.
I am too. And I just love how you said that is such a good answer to that question. I'm kind of blown away by it, but you're right. There are a lot of opportunities, and why not do it here?
Well, there's really nothing you can't do in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And in many cases be easier to start something new here.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, because to your point about the accessibility, again, I never really thought about it, but you're right. Typically there's good governmental support, there's good business community support. I know so many examples of business leaders that they're not just looking out for their own business, they're looking out for all business, or they're looking out for an entire industry, and they know if they can improve their industry, they can improve all of West Virginia and other industries. And you will not see that everywhere. No. You just won't.
No.
Amazing. I think we're going to end it there, Wade. That is a really good way to kind of close things out. But I mean, I do want to check to see if there's anything we haven't talked about that you were hoping that we would get to talk about today.
No, I've talked a lot more than I normally talk in any week.
Well, I can definitely see your passion come through for what you do. And I appreciate you being here because I think you have a really great story. You've been incredibly successful, and I'm sure you don't often get to share things like this. And so now we can put it out into the world so other people can learn from you and be inspired by you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, will you do the lightning round?
Sure.
Okay. No
try.
one's denied me on the lightning round yet, so you wouldn't want to be the first to do that, right? Okay, it's 60 seconds to answer as many open-ended questions as you can, but they're about you. Shouldn't be too hard. What season best fits your personality?
Spring.
Spring. Okay. What's your most used emoji in text?
Smiley face.
What book, song, movie, or podcast has had the greatest impact on your life? This is a stumper question.
Oh my gosh.
I know. You can skip if you want to skip.
Yeah, I got to skip.
Okay. What's something about you that surprises people when they first hear it? Can I volunteer that you have a hot rod shop?
Well, maybe I guess it might surprise you.
Yeah. I think it's cool. Fill in the blank. I spend too much money on
Cars and car parts.
Cars and car parts, yeah. If you catch me by the fridge at night, I'm probably snacking on what?
I don't know, probably a cookie.
Probably a cookie. I like that answer. Okay, and then the last question is best place you've ever traveled to?
I had the opportunity to go to Poland on a business trip once, and I really enjoyed Gdansk and Gdynia in Poland.
Yeah, very cool.
They were very entrepreneurial. It was right after the Soviet Union broke up, and they were starting to taste freedom. And I got to go to Poland, and those people were really embracing their freedom, and I hope to go back there sometime.
Yeah, awesome. Very good. Well, thank you again so much for doing the interview today. It was really good to meet you and get to know you a little bit better.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's all the time we have for today. Until next time, shine bright, everyone.